So today I have the wonderful pleasure of having the amazing Jessie Gender here to tell us a little bit about herself and what Trans Day of Visibility means to her.
Hi, well, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, really happy to have you.
Yeah.
So could you tell everyone who's watching a little bit about who you are? I mean, this could be any of your identities, interests, just really anything that you feel represents you that you'd want people to know to get a sense of who you are.
Yeah, the best way I describe myself is I'm just a weird dork making videos on the internet that try to help people. um, but yeah, I am a YouTuber who goes by the name Jessie Gender, as you said, and I make videos kind of connecting pop culture to LGBTQ and other social and political issues, mainly Star Trek because I'm a huge Trekkie and nerd. But yeah, that's sort of like my main bread and butter. But I'm also trans. I've been out for I want to say, oh dear gosh, am I getting old? I think I've been out for about 7 years at this point, something along those lines. And I go by she, her, and they, them pronouns, and I identify as a demigirl, which is sort of like it's a little bit more to me. That word sort of means a little bit more gender fluid, but leaning more towards sort of the feminine presentation and gender identity, but a little bit more fluid in that identity than sort of a binary identified person.
Wonderful. So just kind of curious what kind of differentiates identifying like as a demigirl versus identifying as a trans woman.
I think for me, I mean, everyone's definition of this is different because I'm someone who kind of believes in the idea that there are as many genders in the world as there are people. So I think it's sort of like kind of looking at what it means to me. And I feel like, I came out as a trans woman and lived as sort of identifying as a trans woman for most of the time that I've been out. But in the past, like, couple of years, I've sort of realized how much I like to sort of play with gender in terms of like my presentation and how I like to exist in the world and kind of have a little bit of fun with my gender presentation. And also, this is going to get like super into philosophy stuff, but I also like gender is, just as we also know, like a social construct. And I feel like to say that for me, this is just for me to like identify into the binary, sort of like limiting to how I want to express myself in the world. And I just want to I don't know, just give myself permission to feel like it's okay to, I'll follow those ebbs and flows in my identity throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year, throughout my life, in trying to just explore who I am and how I want to be. So I know for me, I generally always will identify more femininely and more as a woman. But I also know that there's a little bit more to my identity that just like changes, and how I exist in my gender changes a little bit as I go through life. Identifying as demigirl is probably the best word to describe that for me. Words like demigirl always feel like they don't fully express everything. And I feel like that's
Sure.
the problem with any label. It's just meant to try to explain a feeling, which are never really fully explainable.
Right. It's like some people can use the same labels and they mean completely different things to different
Hmm.
people.
Exactly. Which I honestly, people get like there are some people who shall remain nameless, but who will use that as like, words mean certain things. But it's like, no, I kind of love that. I love learning about people and how words are playful things. Like if words weren't
Yeah.
playful things, we wouldn't read books and we wouldn't have like poems that play with words and things like that. And so I just like, I don't know, it's just you're just trying to describe a person, and a person is very expansive, and words are never going to fully encompass that. And so words should be malleable and playful just as people can be.
Absolutely. Fully agree with everything you just said. So I'm thinking about just as being trans or having any identity that is kind of beyond cisgender
Hmm.
can mean many different things to different people. So can being visible mean
Yeah.
and look very differently to different people. So I'm wondering, what does being visible mean to you, and what does Trans Day of Visibility mean to you?
Coming from a very personal place, just something that I've realized lately, like making content. I've been lucky enough, as I said, to be out for several years now, and be fairly confident in my identity as a trans person. I'm never going to question that I'm trans, and I'm so proudly trans. And in many ways, that feels that like sort of confidence in my identity and who I am, even within that playfulness, as we were talking about, it's become mundane, and that's a good thing. Like I'm just like, I exist. And I remember a time in my life where being trans was this like huge source of anxiety and terror and worry and fear. And now this thing that I tried to hide most from the world is the thing that I wear on my sleeve, the thing that people know first about me if they come across my content, or, you know, in spaces that I exist in, like in terms of like LGBTQ spaces that I go to and things like that, or I just am open about it as always. So it's just something like I just wear on my sleeve nowadays. And I don't really think about that as often, which again is kind of the goal. And I really love that. You know, as I've started to make my own content on the internet, I've also started to realize how important visibility is to folks who don't have that, who
Mhm.
don't, who for one reason or another, whether it's you know, community or family that won't be supportive, their own internal fears, they live in a country that outlaws being trans or will harm people who are being trans, all of those different reasons, and which there's many more. I think it's important to remember how much being visible is a powerful thing. I think also expressing pride in who we are. Like I am proud to be trans. I am proud to be who I am and who exist in the world as I do. Like that's it's a cool thing. Being visible to me is kind of twofold. It's a gift to myself, and it's something that I feel it's also a hope for everyone else too in the trans community, because I feel like with any sort of marginalized group, but something that I can speak for in the trans community, I feel like is just the sense of community of how all of us wanting to work together to make life better for all of us. I think is part of that. And so being visible to me is just a gift to myself that I give to myself, and a hope that I try and give to others to say like, look, this is not something that you should be ashamed of or saddened by or scared of. Yes, I can understand the situations that sort of may make it scary to be trans, but just being you is not that. So yeah, I think that's sort of the the long story.
Yeah, I love describing it as a gift, and kind of like a gift that you can also give to other people as well, to like
Yeah.
normalize the experience of being trans, of being non-binary, of just kind of being outside of the norm of what people expect.
Yeah. Coming out is a gift that you give to yourself. It is allowing people to understand more about you, and allowing you're giving people an insight into who you are, and it may get a little bit poetic, a bit of your soul. Like you're showing people a little bit more of your soul than you've shown them before. People can choose to reject it or not, and that's on them. But you have given a gift every time that you come out. And more importantly, too, you've given a gift to yourself because you've given yourself the chance to show that soul and to be vulnerable in a way that you haven't been before.
So I'm wondering, like, it sounds like being visible, you're able to give that gift to other people. Is there anybody that was kind of influential for
Mm.
you, like their visibility kind of helped pave the way for you coming out and being visible?
Yeah. Trying to like think of the so two people that I can kind of point to as I was sort of deciding to come out. One, and I won't name this person, but a sort of close friend of mine who is still my closest friend. I'm going to use they them pronouns even though they don't use that, just a sort of obscure gender identity. You know, when I was in college, I had never met a sort of LGBTQ person that I was close friends with. Like there was a couple in my high school. I went to like a small farming school. Also, funny story. There were like three LGBTQ identified people, and all of us were valedictorians of our school. So I don't know what that's like of our classes. So I don't know what that says, but I always found that kind of funny. Me and then the two people preceding me were both LGBTQ, which is I just find hilarious. But anyways, I never met an LGBTQ person who I was like close friends with, and I managed to become close friends with two people who were out as bisexual, and they were so like excited and like just loving about exploring their own identity and their own selves, and it was just so normalized to them. And I had never experienced that coming from like a school that was like the small farming town. I remember also at that time being so depressed about not being out. I would go to like, I remember like driving down to Walmart, which was in my college town, and just like walking around like the periphery of the women's clothing section and just being like hating myself. And I'm just like, I can just grab something and go to the change room and no one's going to know. And I can just try on something and be like happy for a minute, and just not having the courage to do even that simple thing. And so I was just so upset, and I would just come back to my room and like cry. And whenever my like roommate wasn't there, and like trying to hide it from my roommate if he walked in. And so those two things kind of combined together to just one night, I asked my friend out to this little tree that we smoke cigars on by, and I came out to them. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if they hadn't just been visibly open about being LGBTQ. And so that really meant a lot to me. So I also want to point to a sort of a pop culture reference, because that's my bread and butter, and that's what I like to do. So Laverne Cox, I remember, was one of the first like trans people like that was out and like just trans on screen, and made no bones about that fact in Orange Is the New Black, that I came across. Like I had met, or I had seen, I should say, numerous like trans representations, like sort of Jessie Dax in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, who kind of like referenced sort of like transgender metaphor. It was always sort of couched in metaphor. But Laverne Cox was someone who was like, she was trans, and she was trans in the show, and she made no excuses for that. And I loved that. And that was sort of really important to me as I was sort of trying to figure out, like, can I be confident as a trans person? So, yeah.
I feel like Laverne Cox was probably influential in a lot of our journeys, just with her. I feel like one of the biggest, like, first positive pieces of representation that we got in the community, because we definitely had some past representation, but a lot of it was pretty negative.
Yeah, it was either negative or kind of sad. Like it would always end in sadness. And to be fair, Laverne Cox's character doesn't exactly have the most happiest of times, but at least she survives, and and she's in the same situation as all the other characters in that show too. But yeah, most representations of trans people up until her character, not all, but most, and certainly the biggest ones in the public eye, were either couched in metaphor, or they didn't really have like a happy ending, or were like sort of subsumed in like weird tropes of like the serial killer or deceptive person or sex worker. Not to judge sex workers in any way, but that was sort of like the only place that trans people could be in many ways.
So kind of thinking, one of the other questions I had in mind, thinking back to this idea of like being able to have visibility be a gift to other people, especially those that aren't able to be out for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, is there any sort of encouragement, support, words of love, or affirmation that you would offer to anybody on this Trans Day of Visibility that either can't be out or chooses not to be out for any reason?
There are people who sadly don't understand the gift that being trans is, that you are giving to them. And I just want anybody who's in that situation to know that you are not the value that other people place on you around you. You are beautiful and amazing and wonderful and awesome and all those things that you deserve to hear about yourself every single day, because you are those things. Just understand that there are people who will appreciate the gift of you, and hopefully you will get a chance to share that gift with them, and hopefully you'll get a chance to meet people who will love that gift that is you. But even if you don't, or even if it takes a long time, just know that you are a gift, and everything about you is wonderful and amazing. And I send you personally my love, and I know that there is a huge community of people that adore you and love you. And the other thing too, I will say, is that if it's just fear of expressing yourself that way, and to come out and try to understand who you are, and sort of like unsure of how to proceed, that's okay too. Like, it's part of the journey and part of the process. I said earlier that like I'm confident in my identity as a trans person. I'm confident in who I am. That did not happen overnight. That took many, many years, and it took a lot of hard days and nights. And a lot of not really great ones either. A lot of really dark days. But that's sadly part of the process, unfortunately, for a lot of trans people, because the way the world that we live in. So I just want to remind anybody who may be stuck in that fear or anxiety or depression or whatever it may be, to just know that it's okay that you're going through that. It's totally fine. And, I hope that you're not stuck there for a long time, but don't compound your pile of bad things by judging yourself for being stuck in that place, because it's okay. It's part of the journey, unfortunately, in many ways. But, we'll be here.
It's okay, it's understandable, and it doesn't make anyone out there any less valid in who they
No.
are.
Yeah.
And one point you're bringing up like makes me just think of like how beautiful in many ways coming out can lead to finding community and can finding support
Yeah.
in way. I know for me personally, like finding community in ways that I never even dreamed of being possible.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like the trans community and the community that I found, even beyond just the trans community, but the sort of like larger LGBTQ community as well. It's like one of the coolest communities I have ever like met and been an honor to be a part of. It's just, I meet like literally almost every day, like smart and thoughtful and caring people who like love to be weird and dorky and strange and are totally okay with that, because the universe sometimes, or the world, I should say, not the universe, but the world sees us as weird and dorky and strange sometimes. And I'm just like, yeah, we'll do that. We'll just accept that and be super happy about it and enjoy that. And I love that. And I love that we just are so cool with expressing ourselves and also just like take that weird dorky strangeness that I love and make it into something that is not only beautiful about ourselves, but also wanting to push it for others, wanting to reach out and understand others and empathize with others and make life better for others, And I think that that's just a really, really cool part of the LGBTQ community in general, and the trans community in specific, is that we sort of like are able to articulate more nuancedly about the world and want to expand our community and our love and who gets to live life to their fullest with just our community. So I think that that's wonderful.
Yeah, well, on that positive note brings me to my last question.
No,
Um,
less.
but thinking of all the positives that can come out of, obviously there's lots of struggles and difficulties that oftentimes come along for transitioning, being trans, coming out, going through this journey. But like community and love and support is one very positive thing that comes out of this for many of us. I'm wondering, what is one of your favorite things about being trans? It might be what we just talked about, or it might be something else.
I mean, I think it is kind of that it is just like we allow ourselves to be dorky, weird, strange, out there, sort of not defined by the regular rules of society. And I think that that's like just my favorite part of just being trans, is that there's a little bit of an element of like, yeah, kind of screw you, system, screw you world, like. And I think that that intersects so wonderfully with so many other things, when part of the reason that I talk about politics and social issues on my channel is because I feel like, for trans people, and this is not, I'm not saying this is like unique to me, but for a lot of trans people, or unique to our community in general. But I think one of the things that I love about the trans community is that like there's this sense of like an outsider perspective that you can kind of like look at everything and say like, oh, I kind of see how this works, and where like how the world may not actually be, doesn't need to be this way in many senses. And so I love that aspect of being trans, of like kind of like understanding that the way that people tell us that we're supposed to be in gender and society and life does not have to be how things are. And again, combining that with empathy and compassion and love that also is just part and ingrained within the trans community. I think those two things combined, that sort of outsider perspective combined with empathy and love, I think is the thing that I truly love about being trans. Like, I think that's just, for many trans people, that is like a defining experience of being trans, that combination of those two things. And I think that that's really awesome.
Yeah, it's like we eventually realize that the way everybody's telling us that we're supposed to show up in the world doesn't fit for us. And then we also realize that's okay, but it doesn't fit for us.
Exactly. And then you then you start going further and further. You're like, oh yeah, a lot of this world is BS.
Yeah. So I'm asking, everybody that I'm doing these videos with to identify any organization that supports trans and non-binary people in any way, shape, or form, to give a shout out to them, to ask anybody who've used this to support and donate time and energy if they're able to. What organization would you like to give a shout out to?
I am going to give a shout out to the Transgender Law Center, because I just like what they do, and they do a lot of work, sort of helping push different laws and issues that I think is kind of important to sort of think about in terms of, like, we live sadly in a very frustrating system, and it's really, I think for me, it's cool to see a group that like pushes within the system to try and make life better for people. We need people both within and without of the system sort of trying to fight for trans rights. And I think that the Transgender Law Center does a really, really good job of doing that.
And I'll be sure to put links to the Transgender Law Center below to make it
right
easy
right
for everyone to access.
This is like the YouTuber like pet, like it's like
thumbs up down below.
Exactly.
So kind of in closing, is there any other thoughts you wanted to share? Anything we didn't touch on that you feel you'd want to share in this video?
I guess just to reiterate, is just like, to anybody who's watching this and who, is not out or wants to be visible, just, it's all about taking time and learning to, love yourself and explore yourself, and remember that coming out is always a gift.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again, Jessie. It's been an absolute delight to have you. And I was very excited when you replied to my email. I'm like, yes, I would love to do this. Made me very happy.
Well, good. I'm glad. And thank you for having me. And thank you for allowing me to have a chance to talk about this. I really, really, really appreciate it.
In closing, thank you everyone who is able to take the time to watch this. As always, please be sure to give this a huge thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you have not done so already.
Hit that subscribe. Do it, do it, do it.
And of course, my cat Tipsy and I love you all. She is here as always.
Cutie.
But yeah, love you all, and bye for now.